This has been a fun experience, really fast, different for me because I'm used to having a lot more time to kind of labor and hit you with stuff. So I hope I didn't overwhelm you, and that we gave you tools that you can use to be more effective in the classroom. So, hey, good morning. So, in terms of some takeaways, these are some things that I'd like for you to kind of take away. So, this comes out of a book that I found. It was quite interesting. Because I was looking for books with a religious context that actually talked about how to deal with this idea of racism and oppression. And I found this book by James Newton Poling, P-O-L-I-N-G, called Deliver Us from Evil, Resisting Racial and Gender Oppression. And for a guy who does this, to find a book that had some biblical teachings, particularly when this one was printed, and when I found it, it was one of the few that I was able to find. And so what James suggests is that we need to practice goodness in the face of evil. And in the context that we've been talking about in terms of educational equity, creating fair and balanced environments where students get what they need, what would we consider to be evil? What is a blockage to that we might consider evil? Yes.
Bias.
So bias. So bias could be evil, right? And what's the nature of bias? Because you have an excellent point that bias could be, in fact, evil. Bias could be good too, but typically we end up talking about it as being evil. But bias is a symptom of something else. What's that?
Our paradigm.
Our paradigm, right? So our paradigm forms a bias. And why do we have a particular paradigm? We may have different, we may have many paradigms, but why might we have a biased paradigm? Where do paradigms come from?
Parents.
From our parents.
Experiences.
Experience. From what? Our context, right? So bias is our particular context. Now, so we talked about that. So we said bias could be evil. What else is evil? So we said bias could be evil. What else could be evil? Yes.
So prejudice and bigotry, discrimination.
Prejudice, bigotry, and discrimination could be evil. And why are we suggesting that those things, the bias and prejudice and discrimination and bigotry, even some of our paradigms, why are we suggesting that those could be evil? So what do I mean by evil? So is there somebody walking around with, in a red suit and a tail with, or I guess there's a new TV show called Lucifer, and the guy who plays Lucifer, I forgot what channel it's on, but maybe like Fox or something, I don't know. But the guy who plays Lucifer makes this announcement. He says, "I want to thank all the actors." He said, "No. All of you who are receiving Academy Awards, don't forget to thank me." That's what he said. That's Lucifer, right? So when we talk about this idea of evil, what am I talking about? What would be evil in an educational context? Yes, ma'am.
Anything that could like limit a student from reaching like their full potential.
Yeah, right? Anything that limits a student from reaching their full potential or having their what? Their human soul protected. Anything that tries to drive a breach between the spirit and the body, that tries to destroy the human soul, I would consider to be evil. Sexism, evil, right? Why? Because it tries to say that I want to create, instead of having a complete human soul, I want to create a thing, and the thing is called a what? Whatever. You know, so you know, so the world has well, so we used to call ladies chicks. Like, dude, you check out that chick, man. What's up with that? Right? When I got to Minnesota, the high school students that I had, they called women broads. Yeah, look at that broad. I was like, what? Right? So this idea of sexism is trying to turn women into things as opposed to people. I can't imagine being Secretary of State of the United States and somebody yelling out while I'm talking, iron my shirt. Right? That's happened to Hillary Clinton on occasion. She's speaking and it's, you know, iron my shirt kind of thing. Like, really? I would even say, and I would say that a number of ways in which we think could be an assault on the human soul. And anything that's an assault on the human soul is inherently evil, particularly in the educational context. We also know that evil is all those things that aren't aligned with the plan that God has, right? So God's plan is life. So anything that's causing death would be evil. So there's that. So in the book, he suggests that these are some things that we should consider when trying to practice goodness. So first, that we need to develop a spirituality of resistance. And if we're going to resist evil, then we must be full of what?
Good.
Okay, so good.
Holy Spirit.
Okay, so the Holy Spirit. What else? In real practical terms, we should be full of love, right? Now, we typically talk about love. Have you guys been exposed to the three kind of types of love? The three aspects of love, right? So what's the first aspect? Or what's the first type, if you will? Starts with an E. Eros, right? And that's where we get the root word for eroticism, right? So there's, you know, three types of love, if you will. One is eros, which is where we get the word eroticism, and that basically means self-pleasing love, right? So what's the problem with self-pleasing love? So it's very selfish, right? And you do it because what?
Makes you happy.
It makes you happy. It makes you feel good. But what happens when it doesn't make you happy and it doesn't make you feel good? You stop it. You ditch it, right? So there is eros, and then there is also philos, which is like friendship love, where we get Philadelphia, right, the city, and it's called the city of brotherly love. Now, the funny thing about this idea of philos is that it's contractual. I give you $20 because what?
Like,
Because I like you?
Not-
Not that much, no. We're in a contract. I give you $20 because I know what?
but you'll take it?
that she'll take
She'll
it,
repay you, right? She'll take
that at
it.
some point she can pay me back. But if you don't pay me back, we got a problem. Whether it's mentioned or not, right? So Philadelphia or brotherly love is a contractual thing. So I'll do for you because I know you can do for me. But if you don't do for me the way I did for you, we got a problem, right? And then lastly is agape, which is
Unconditional.
unconditional. Because you exist, I'm going to give this to you. Not because you've done, but because you exist. All right? So we have to develop a spirituality of resistance. And what that means is that we build up a spirituality based on love, because love helps to resist evil. And if we said that bigotry and prejudice and discrimination and bias and unlimited paradigms, if we said that those things are evil, then love creates our resistance to that. All right? So how does love become a resistance to bigotry? How does that work? What does that even mean? What does that even mean?
Can you repeat the question?
Yep. So how does love build a resistance to evil? But we talked about this idea of bigotry. So how does love build a resistance to bigotry?
Bigotry was like the emotion,
So bigotry is the emotion.
and love would be like the opposite of the negative emotion.
And so how does that play out practically? Because I agree with you. You're right.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Like you give them love and respect regardless of what you associate with, like how they look, just because they exist. That type of love.
Yeah. Right. So how many of you have family members who are politically incorrect? They tell incorrect they tell bad jokes. They are, okay, you put your hands down. Thank you. So I don't know about you. So I had an uncle like that. And my parents would say, my mother would ask my dad, Dad, is so-and-so going to be at this gathering? And he was like, yeah, they'll be at the gathering. She was like, we're not going. Like, what are you talking about? We're not going. We're not going because I don't want him influencing the kids. I don't want him telling those jokes. I don't want him, he acts all wild and crazy. And in some cases, we wouldn't go. In other cases, we would go, right? And then I would be subjected to this dude's bad jokes, his inappropriate ways, and all sorts of stuff. What happens when we have people like that in our lives who are inappropriate or aren't, so-called politically correct? And I'm not into political correctness. Do they get better because we're not in their lives? No, they do not get better. As a matter of fact, they get what? They get worse. So this resistance to the spirituality of resistance, this love says, I will tether myself to you. Now, the thing I like about, walking my dog now as opposed to when I was a kid walking a dog is I have this little leash thing with this little rope. And when I want to let the dog run away, I just hit the button and the thing gets real long and the dog is running all around. And then when somebody else brings their dog, I can retract it, right? And bring the dog right back to me. The same kind of thing needs to happen when we talk about this resistance to evil around these things. We can't be salt just in the container. We have to be salt spread out. I mean, it looks good sitting there, but we can't be salt just contained unto ourselves. And so when we talk about this development of spirituality to resistance, we have to help resist bigotry, prejudice, discrimination, bias, or limited paradigms with love by engaging with folks, even if we don't necessarily agree with everything that they do, because we have to be the salt, right? I told you guys the fish story, right? When I was in high school. No? Oh, so this would have been my junior year in high school. So we did, so in my parents' house, we did everything in the kitchen, right? Because that's where my mom was. We all wanted to be around mom and that kind of stuff. So, she'd cook in the kitchen. We had a little TV in the kitchen. It was as funny as probably, 10-inch screen or whatever, little black and white thing. We had that in the kitchen. We do our homework in the kitchen. The ironing board was in the kitchen, and in the 80s, it was really important to have creases in your jeans. So that was an important thing. So I had my jeans laid out so I could, put that little extra crease in them before the morning. We would have penny loafers, and because we were balling, we would put quarters in our penny loafers. Oh, there it is right there, right? So we were balling. He had quarters. Everybody else had pennies, right? Goofiness, right? But so it's Thursday night, and my mom cooks fish for dinner. So she cooks fish for dinner. Now, I will tell you this, that I feel for you guys. I feel for you big time. Because when I graduated from high school, it was over. Like high school was over. But now I notice, like with my niece, she graduated from high school, and high school followed her because they're all her Facebook friends, right? So when I got older, I was like, so I could stop being who I was in high school and be this new person, right? Like, oh, I could be as cool as I am now because I was not that cool when I was in high school, right? I know. If you want to be like me, that's cool. No. At any rate, so this all this. So my mom's cooking fish for dinner. Friday morning, first hour of algebra class, I have a problem.
You smell like fish.
I smell like fish. And why do I smell like fish?
Because you ironed your pants.
Because I ironed my pants. I left them in the kitchen. Now, so I feel for you because I thought that had passed until I got a message on Facebook. Is this Andre? Yeah, this is Andre. The fish boy? Yeah. Right. Here, I'm grown now, feeling like I'm back in high school, right? So what was the problem? Why did my clothes smell like fish?
Because you left it in the kitchen.
Because I left them in the kitchen. Did I have other clothes that didn't smell like fish? Yeah, I did. Where those clothes were in my closet. And why did the clothes in my closet not smell like fish, but because they weren't exposed to the fish smell? Now I'm going to ask a question. I want you to think about this after you chuckle. What do the people who hang around you smell like? Do they smell good like you smell? Because sometimes when we try to build this spirituality of resistance and we try to love folks, we're nervous because we don't think that we actually will have an impact on them. We don't think we'll have an impact on them. And so it's important to realize and ask yourself, am I as good as I think I am? And how will you know that you're as good as you think you are? How do you know a tomato plant from a sunflower plant? Because of its fruit, right? So you'll start seeing fruit. And not because you want to see this thing, but people will come up and tell you stuff, or you'll see stuff. I was at PetSmart the other day, and saw one of my middle schoolers with her mom. And she was like, Andre, you cut your hair, right? Because I used to have dreads down to my waist, big old mane, you know, just and you know, kids loved it because it gave them something to pay attention to, even if they didn't want to pay attention to me. Right? So no, sorry, she was like, you know, favorite teacher, good thing, but she did not have to say anything to me, and I didn't deserve to be said anything to. I mean, I just did what I was supposed to do, and so for me, that's fruit. That's encouraging to me. That after all these years, I still have students who want to say hello, right? And so that fruit. Next is live in solidarity with people in resistance. So resistance people, and what that means is don't get in people's way, right? So for like right now, there's this movement called Black Lives Matter. And I don't agree with everything that they do. I don't agree with everything that they believe. But I'm not going to get in their way, right? I'm going to be. I got to sit down with them and find out what it is that they believe, so I can better understand, right? So I'm not going to get in their way, and then I'm going to seek to understand, because in seeking to understand, that's the only way I will understand. Now, understanding and changing my beliefs are not necessarily connected, right? But at least I understand. I don't understand GLBTQ issues, but I want to understand, because I want them to have a whole human soul. I'm not the judge of where people go. I'm not the judge. That's not my job. My job is to love them, right? And so sometimes that love is tough love in terms of fighting for this resistance. We also have to take moral and material inventory of our own lives, right? So one thing that I know is that when I have an abundance of stuff, I try to make sure that I share that whenever possible, right? I try to make sure that other people have. Now, there's a difference between this idea of charity, which is, so the goodwill is an interesting kind of thing, right? Because what does the goodwill do?
Takes in donations and then sells them.
Yep, so it takes in, so it gets stuff for free and then they make money off of it. So they take in donations and then they use they sell those things in their stores to make blah, blah, blah. And there are times for donations. But I think I told you, we were doing a community giveaway in our community, and people, and this irritates me a little bit, and I'm not sure what to do with that other than just be myself. But people went into their basements and they got all their junk and they brought it to the community distribution event, right? So we got, 32-inch TVs that weigh 250 pounds, right? Like, you've seen those. And that's cool that you want to give your stuff away, but I don't know that's the intention. So my wife and I, we were at Target, and they had these sales on lamps, and we were looking at the lamp. We were like, oh, those are some nice lamps. And we said, you know what? I bet people would dig those lamps, right? So we went and we bought up all these lamps. So we had we had 3 carts, and the Target people were like, is this really that good of a deal? I was like, oh yeah, it is, but we're doing this thing. And so we went and we got all these brand new lamps, and they were cheap. I mean, inexpensive, right? Inexpensive, brand new lamps. Took them to the giveaway thing, and They went. Guess why they went? Because that's what people needed and that's what people wanted. What do you think happened with the 52-inch, 200-pound? Now we got to throw it away, give it to, pay for all this other stuff. Why? Because people were trying to give somebody something they didn't want, as opposed to giving people what they need, right? And so when we talk about this, taking moral inventory, what are my motivations in not only in teaching, but when I'm working with multicultural students, what's motivating? Do I feel pity for them? Or do I want to raise them up so that they can have the same things that I have? I will never, ever forget that there was a student that I had in my class who I believed was trash. Now, I wouldn't say that to the student, but that's what I had in my heart. I was like, this student is garbage. And unfortunately, I treated her like garbage. She was disrespectful, so I was disrespectful back. She obviously didn't have high self-esteem because she would be so mean and evil, and I'd be mean and evil right back to her. Never breaking a rule, because there's no rules on that in schools, right? But I was just as nasty as she was to me. It was tit for tat, nasty for nasty. And her life turned out pretty rough, pretty bad. I'm not saying I'm the reason for that, but was horrible. Her life was horrible. Spent time in jail, went prison, kids out of wedlock, lots of different dads, just not being able to keep it together, in and out of jail situations, theft, cars, check fraud, just horrible stuff. And after school and stuff, I'm watching her life just fall apart, just like I thought it would, because she was trash and whatever. And so one day I get this email from her. And this is years after she's been out of my class, and I wasn't teaching at the school anymore or whatnot. Get not an email, but a poke on Facebook. That's when Facebook used to poke, right? And you could slap people, all this, right? So she sent me a poke, and I received it. And I poked her back, and so she sent me an email, and she said, via Facebook, she said, Andre, I want to thank you for everything that you taught me. I remembered, and then she said some stuff that she remembered that I said. And I was so convicted. I fell on my knees and I cried. I prayed about it, but I cried. Because here I was being mean to the student, and she saw my meanness as being good. Then I wondered to myself, what if I actually was good? What if I was better to her than what I thought I was doing? Could I have made a bigger deposit in her life than the one that I did? And so, no, I can't write off people, right? So I have to check my motives. So anytime I'm feeling some kind of way, I got to check myself and say, okay, what's going on with you? There are people you will not like. And there will be students that get on your nerves. Mostly they get on your nerves because they probably remind you of you. Or secondly, they get on your nerves because you have an unresolved issue with somebody in your past that they remind you of. A bully, a friend, whatnot, right? Next is we have to confront the abuser within us. So I have to look at myself and say, what is going on with me that could be contributing to evil? How was I brought up in ways that could be contributing to this concept of evil, of bigotry, prejudice, discrimination, limited paradigms, having bias? What ways was I do that? And then I have to figure out what I'm going to do about it, right? Next is we have to confront persons of power, right? So when we see injustice, when we see oppression, when we see evil, we have to address it. So I was at Cub. I got a lot of Cub stories, but I was at Cub, and there was a woman who was at the cashier, who obviously English was her second language and Spanish was her dominant language, and you know, so I'm kind of listening in, and I don't know if this ever happens to you, but you listen to someone speaking another language, and then they say a word in English, and then that you're like, I don't know, I just kind of was listening to a conversation. At any rate, so this woman's predominant language is Spanish, and so she's got a cart full of groceries, and she's got 3 kids, and there's candy in that aisle, right? So she's trying to negotiate getting all the groceries in while keeping the candy out, because the kids are trying to stick the candy in and all this kind of stuff. And there's a woman in front of me who's behind this lady, who is what my grandmother would call acting ugly. So she's doing this. I wish those people would, and if they're going to be in our country, they should, and blah, blah, blah. So she's mumbling all this stuff loud enough for me to hear, but not loud enough to have a conversation about it, right? So I'm standing there and I'm listening to this woman go through her little, and I'm like, I teach educational equity. I'm a diversity trainer. I know what to do. I said, I got my PowerPoints in the car. I got, you know, some handouts I can give her. But then I thought about it. I was like, no. This is what I'll do. That's it. When I did that, what do you think happened to the woman's behavior? She stopped it. And why do you think she stopped?
Because she noticed that somebody else was listening.
Because she noticed that somebody else was listening. Back to herself. Because as much as we want to be, you know, the next Bachelor with the Stars, or, you know, the America's Next Top Model, all that stuff, nobody wants to be watched. Nobody wants to be watched. And when we think we're being watched, we act differently than when that's why in the nightclubs, the lights is always off. And at Hollister. No, is that the story? Is it Hollister? Yeah. Abercrombie and Abercrombie and Fitch. I went in there one time, I was like, what? I was like, can somebody help? And then you not only can you not see, you can't hear it. And then I was like, what is that smell? Oh my God, what is going on? I was like, it was the bizarrest little thing. I said, this story is not for me. And then they got naked teenagers all up in there, like, I was like, oh no, I can't come up in here. I was like, they need a cover charge for that kind of stuff. But then the thing I think is really funny is the flip, is the opposite of that, which is Forever 21. It was not quite the opposite, but like everything in there is white. Like you were like, whoa, like my sunglasses. And I dare you to look on the bottom of Forever 21's bags. John 3:16 is on the bottom of all the bags. It's hard to believe that they're a Christian organization, but I guess if you put John 3:16 on something, that makes it legit. Okay, anyway, so we have to confront the persons of power. And in that particular situation, that woman thought she had power. She could say what she wanted to say, blah, blah, blah. But I made her think about herself. And more often than not, evil comes because people aren't thinking. They're not thinking. They're just operating, playing tapes, that kind of stuff. Yeah, like when Sarah was saying her dad said, "Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a nigger by the toe." I was like, whoa. I was like, I used to say that as a kid, but use, tiger or use something else, but never that, like, wow. But her parents thought enough to be thoughtful to not teach her to say that, right? So as generations go forward, we get better at that stuff because we start confronting that kind of stuff. And then we also have to confront institutions. I think it's imperative that we address the second clause in the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which says we will have no slavery, no indentured servants, except what? Except for criminals, right? People convicted of crimes. And nowadays it's like, what was that Tom Cruise movie, Minority Report? You can be convicted of pre-crime, right? Before you even get into the court, you get convicted of stuff. I know that the ban the box, have you heard that? That discussion, ban the box is when you go to fill out a job application, they ask if you've been convicted of a crime on the application. And so that was to, protect an employer from, or use it as a weeding out process. But we found that leads to discrimination because the way things have been playing out in our communities, there are lots of people who have been either convicted of a crime or have been engaged with the criminal justice system, who've paid their dues, but now need to move on, right? So if you stole a candy bar when you were 13 or even 18 and you were convicted, now you're 36, should you still be held, accountable for those things? I don't know, but when you get a felony, that's the kind of stuff that happens, and it follows you for the rest of your life. But felonies are something that we can control. We get to say what those are because felonies are determined by states, so they're not some mystical thing. So the populace gets to say that stuff. And we need to confront these institutions, particularly when they're generating this idea of evil, when they're preventing people from having access to their full potential, right? And that's what we're looking for as teachers. How do we get students access to their full potential? So I would also suggest that there's a kind of a system of evil, and I want to talk about this idea of the fabric of oppression, and consequently, its relationship to power. So what have you been told about power? What is power? Knowledge is power. What is power?
When people have authority.
When people have authority. Control. Any science teachers? Anybody take physics?
Mm-hmm.
All right. What in terms of physics, what is power? All right. So power is the ability to do work. In our society, what do you need, or what can you use to get things done? that provide you power?
Resources,
So resources like what? Give me an example of a resource.
money.
Money.
Education,
What else?
technology,
Technology, all right. What else gives you power?
education,
Education.
knowledge,
Okay. So education, knowledge. Access to resources. Access to resources. Jobs. Education, so forth and so on, right? So this access to these things gives you power. So I'm going to deal with this idea, this fabric of oppression, that all that evil takes place even within a context, right? And the context usually is limiting people's power, people's ability to do work. So there are two groups that we will talk about. There's the dominant group and the target group. So the dominant group is characterized by easy or open access to power. And the target group is characterized by limited or delayed access to power. All right. So in terms of this concept or this construct of race, what group would have easier open access to power according to this idea of race? Yep, so what group would be dominant?
white males,
Okay, so we're just talking about race, so we'll use this generic term of white. And then here we would use this idea that POC or people of color have limited access, right? In terms of gender, what group would have the greatest access to goods, jobs, services, and money according to gender?
males,
Males. And then females. In terms of religion, who has the greatest access to?
Christian,
Yep, so Christians. And down here we would have kind of other faiths. In terms of looks, who has the greatest access to goods, jobs, services, and money?
good-looking people,
Good-looking people, right? So I like using, just as an example, Barbie and Ken, right? And then down here would be regular looking folk like ourselves. In terms of abilities, what group of people have the greatest access to goods, jobs, services, and money in terms of physical and mental and emotional abilities? So, okay, so the well-able, the healthy, and I like to say the temporarily able. Because how many of you are planning to get old?
I don't like to.
Right? Yeah, so we will be disabled at some point, right? So there's that, and then people with disabilities. Now, I don't know if you've picked up on the way that I say some things. So like this idea of being disabled, have people heard people talk about disabled people? Right. So we have, what is the program called for, we have some developmentally delayed, it's called the BUILD program, right? Now, I will tell you, that has caused a stink in the atmosphere. People are like, why are we spending money doing that? Doing the BUILD program? Why would we do that? And why do you think we would do that?
So that everybody can have an education.
Yeah, so everybody can have an education so we can undo some of this evil, right? In other parts of the world, people with disabilities get locked into a room for 3 days. If they survive, then they put them in an institution. If not, they take the bodies out someplace, right? So we're trying to undo some evil stuff. And what's the difference between people of color and colored people? Anyone ever wonder? Yes.
When you talk about colored people, it's defined no matter how they look, or like disabled people, you're the disability, you're not a person who has a disability.
People first language, right? So sometimes people get people first language confused with political correctness. You're just trying to be politically correct. No, I'm trying to identify someone's humanity before I identify any other characteristic about them, right? So colored people is just, and that's an interesting term because I've seen white people turn some very interesting colors, but they're not considered, green, blue, red, all that kind of stuff. I just get a nice little purple hue. That's all I get. If I'm embarrassed or if I'm suntan, that's the same thing, So sometimes people are like, "Are you embarrassed?" Like, no, I just got a tan. I'm good. Anyway, all right. So we have the dominant group, we have the target group, and we have the forms of oppression or the forms of evil. And what do we call those forms based on race? Racism, gender bias. Sometimes we may refer to it, depending on the context, as sexism. We call this religious bias. And we call this looksism. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah, looksism. And it's very interesting. You look at these places in the mall, particularly that one place I just mentioned, Hollister or Abercrombie with the Fitch, and pretty people. Pretty people.
Their CEO was so ugly.
Really?
Yeah, because he was talking about he didn't want their clothes donated because he didn't want the people who get donated to wear their stuff there because they don't want their brand.
Yeah.
But he looks like the troll from Lord of the Rings.
Okay, well,
We'll
I feel,
learn.
oh, my precious, the precious. No, no, I was in a diversity meeting and they said they're diversity people and they came in, they sat down, two big old dudes, like they was like 6'4". I was like, they make clothes that big, and they were all pretty. And the dude had his shirt open, no chest hair, it was all waxed. I was like, you guys are some pretty people, right? They've also been accused of kind of this looksism thing where they don't hire people who don't fit a particular mold because they don't fit our brand, which goes to that idea we won't donate stuff because those people don't fit our stuff. So there's looksism, and then we'll call this ableism, right? So, and the idea is that these forms of evil limit people's access to goods, jobs, services, and money. So here's where the rub comes in when we start talking about this idea of the fabric of oppression. We talk about, well, if that's evil and I see myself all across the top, does that mean I'm evil? And I would suggest you might want to ask yourself. Because as Spider-Man said, as Uncle Ben said to Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So it's not so much, if you find yourself all across the top or you find yourself all across the bottom, whether you have power or don't have power, is what are you doing with the power that you have? What are you doing with that power, right? So this idea of the fabric of oppression is that there is no hierarchy of oppression. There's not one that's more important than another, but they're all connected and they're intersected. And oftentimes the hope is if we just start pulling on one of these jokers, that will unravel the whole thing. So that's typically the hope when we talk about this idea of the fabric of oppression. Because does sexism hurt more than lookism? Is that pain greater? Is racism more hurtful than ableism? Depends on the person, right? There is no measurement for pain. So one person's pain could be pretty severe, right? While another person's pain, given the severity of that other person, might not be the same. Because when you hurt yourself or whatnot, what does the doctor ask you? Rate the pain. And what scale do they use? 1 to 10. So 1 to 10, what is the pain for you? Now, Ken, you were skydiving and your arm got ripped off. I'm extreme, right? So your arm got ripped off. And you're like, ah! And I walk up to you and say, you know what? It didn't hurt that bad. It's only a flesh wound, right? Right? Yeah, I say that to you. Do I have the right to say that? No, I don't have the right to say that because what? My arm ain't ripped off, right? So a lot of times when we hear this kind of stuff, we're like, quit belly aching. It's not that bad for women. Well, you ain't no woman, as an example, right? And so we can't compare, and that's sometimes what we try to do. And it's funny with the election, particularly the last election, where Hillary was running. People were trying to say, let's measure, is it time for a black lady? I mean, is it time for a black guy or a white lady? it's more important to do one or the other. No, it's important to undo the stupid system that says that we have to have a racial hierarchy. And yeah, did I talk about the racial hierarchy at all? Okay, so when I say racial hierarchy, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Idea.
You have an idea. So what's your idea about what I'm talking about?
The people who have like the power based on like race versus the people who don't.
Okay, cool. The other thing is that the racial hierarchy says that there is a pyramid of race. And if you break that pyramid of race, or there is a rotation, and if you break the rotation, we got a problem. So I was watching Blackish. Has anyone seen that show?
Yeah.
Okay, I stopped watching it because it was driving me crazy. It was driving me crazy. You know, oh Lord have mercy, I couldn't take it. Oh, but at any rate, so I was watching this episode. It's a Christmas episode, and so the dad, the protagonist in the show, is his name is Dre. I'm not sure if it's Andre or if it's just Dre, but they're referred to as Dre. So he's in the office, and it's the Christmas party that's coming up, and the guy who played Santa Claus last year died of a heart attack because he was obese. I think it was a pun on Santa Claus being fat and trying to get down chimneys. But anybody ever wonder about that? How does that dude get down the chimneys? You saw him?
It expands. Haven't you seen Santa Claus?
No.
It expands for them.
Oh, okay. I have to remember that. So at any rate, so the Santa Claus guy died. So the dad, Dre, goes up to the supervisor, owner, dude, or whatever, and was like, "Look, man, when you think about Santa Claus this year, I want you to think outside of the box. I want you to think outside of your normal parameters for who Santa Claus is, because he can represent so much more." And so the guy was like, "You know what? I wasn't going to think outside the box, but I'm going to do that. I'm going to think outside the box." And he said, because I think we need to acknowledge diversity here. And the dad is like, "Yeah, that's right. He's like, because demographics are changing, and we need to keep up with the times. And the dad is like, yeah. He's like, "All right, well, I'm going to make my announcement at lunch, and we'll do that." And so he, at lunchtime, he brings everybody around the water cooler. He says, "All right, we want to announce Santa Claus for this year, and it is Juanita Lopez from HR." And the dad goes nuts. He's like, wait a minute. Everybody knows that it's a white man, then it's a black man, and then it's a white woman, and then it's a Hispanic, right? And then an Asian. So he went down this line because he thought there was this pecking order, right? And a lot of times that's how we treat stuff when we're not conscious, because we think that racial designation or that racial hierarchy has some bearing. So there's that. So let's do this. Let's take about 7 minutes. We'll take a 7-minute break. We'll come back and we'll finish these notes. Talk a little bit about your final, because I want to make sure I have everything in there that you need. That we've covered everything you need.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Thank you so much.
May I still do the recording? Yeah.